partner with Axon, you immediately gain access to a full range of products and solutions designed to meet the complex needs of today's grower. We carry all major brands and sizes of tires and wheels. We specialize in large diameter wheels for large equipment. We have one of the largest OEM replacement wheel inventories in North America. Known for extreme flotation setups, duals, and triples, we have wheels for all makes and models of tractors, sprayers, combines, and grain carts. If we don't have the wheel in stock, we'll custom build, sandblast, and paint in-house. There isn't a more vast inventory in North America dedicated to helping dealers move more iron. With facilities on the West Coast and in the heart of the Midwest, leverage our 230,000 square feet of indoor inventory to solve any problem a grower may have. Move more iron with Axon.
Moving iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast number 322. This edition of Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Axon Tire, helping dealers move more iron for the past 100 years. For more information, go to axontire.com. Axon Tire would like to give the loyal listeners of the Moving Iron Podcast a couple free gifts here. They have a free beanie. So if you want to send that an email to marketing@axontire.com, they'll send that to you in the mail. Also, if you want to attend the Moving Iron Summit coming up here in Nashville, Tennessee, they will take care of the first $50 of the registration fee by sending me an email at MovingIronPodcast@MovingIronPodcast.com. I'll get that taken care of. So check those two things out. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 for all your trucking needs at Valley Transportation. Our goal is to help you reach yours. And no matter how you buy ag equipment, whether it's from a dealer, an auction, or a private party, AgDirect can help you finance it. You can even apply online at agdirect.com. Learn more about your financing options at agdirect.com. Tractor Zoom has access to over 20 billion in heavy equipment sales data. Tractor Zoom's Iron Comps is the industry's trusted solution for transparent equipment values and auctionable pricing insights. And finally, this podcast is brought to you by Anvil AppWorks. Their Dealer Connect CRMI app with integrated inventory management is an affordable Salesforce-based solution for your dealership. Create connected customer experience to transform how you work today. I have got Alan Hoskins back on here with me. Alan is now correct me if I'm wrong here, you're the President and CEO and National Sales Manager.
President and National Sales Director.
President and National Sales Director. There you go. There you go. And he is out of, what is it? It's Lexington, right? Louisville. So I asked Alan if he wanted to come on and do a monthly thing and just kind of talk about what he sees happening in the banking industry and how it overall kind of reacts to what we see happen in the ag industry. And he was more than willing to do that. So Alan, I appreciate this, man. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, Casey, I appreciate the invitation. I always enjoy being on here. And as you and I have talked, I always learn some things by being on your podcast as well.
Well, I appreciate that, man. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be good. So let's start with this. So, we're headed into, you got renewal season coming up. You got farm lines of credit coming up here for renewal and what that looks like. This time last year, what was interest rates? 3.5%?
About 3.25.
Yes. So now we're at the Fed is right now, and you start looking at stuff all over the place. So you're going to be somewhere between, depending on what it is, 6.5% to 8%, depending on what the Fed continues to do going into February and March in those time frames. What conversations are you having right now with the people you're working with, Alan, that are different than what you were having this time last year?
Sure. Well, first of all, Casey, there have already been a lot of conversations. And those conversations were designed to make sure borrowers understood where interest rates were, what that meant to them, so that there's not a case of a one-time-a-year communication creating sticker shock,
right,
because of what rates have done, but also just trying to make sure that the communication flow stays constant to help them devise some strategies to minimize the impact that the interest rate increases are going to have. So over the past few months, we've talked about, obviously, none of us have a crystal ball that can accurately predict when interest rates are going to move or where they're going to move. So it's been a good exercise to make sure that people understood where they were currently, make sure kind of where the market was headed, and be able to, in cases over the past few months, if there were some good opportunities to help them restructure some debt, get that done before rates went any higher and get some rates locked in, as well as talking about the impact on operating on interest equipment, because there's still good opportunity, I think, in purchasing equipment out there.
Sure.
So it's been more a matter of helping strategize what the impact of these interest rate increases will look like and how to minimize that impact.
Yeah. So one thing I've talked a lot about, and I've written a lot of articles about it, and talked a lot about it on the podcast, is this rise of the upgrade kit and what that looks like. So you start looking at some of these, the price of new equipment, some of the technology that you can just retrofit back to out there. There's primarily it's on planters and sprayers right now, but I think other platforms are coming soon. You're going to start seeing some different stuff pop up. You take a look at and this is the thing I would love to have your perspective on from just a balance sheet perspective and what it looks like and how you measure this. I buy 5 years ago, I bought a $250,000 planter, right? I go to the local dealer down here and I'm going to price out a new planter, and the new planter is now whatever, $400,000 or whatever the number is, right? I'm looking at that going like, I'm going to get X dollars for mine, what about X dealer, my trade difference is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's just say $250,000, $300,000, something like that, to make that trade difference happen. I can get the same upgrade kit, right, for, $150,000, $200,000, right? So from a cash outlay perspective, right, we're looking at, there's $150,000, $100,000 difference in cash outlay. Now, the difference is now I still have my investment that I made in my $250,000 planner or $200,000 planner 5 years ago. I'm going to put another $250,000 or $200,000 down there. So now I got a $500,000 planner, or I could just buy a brand new one for $400,000, but the cash outlay and everything else that's there is going to be even greater than, what we talked about previously. How do you look at that? And how does that fit into what you're talking? Because you're really upgrading something to basically a new machine now. It's new. It's just the same as different. The only difference is the bar and the capital outlay you had before. So I guess as you're looking at that, Alan, how do you weigh that technology, and how do you look at that from a dollars and cents perspective?
Casey, that's a great question. And first of all, I'll give a disclaimer here that what I'm about to say may not be reflective of all in the lending industry. This is my personal perspective.
Right on.
So I'll say that right up front. I'll also say this, what I'm about to say, the folks that listen to your podcast regularly, this is going to sound somewhat familiar to them. And that's this. You and I have talked before about the difference between the investment in trading or upgrading equipment versus, the cost of investing or upgrading equipment. And Casey, here's what I mean by that. Here's the real life example. I have some customers that I can take their 10-year yield history, and I can point to the exact year that they made a significant investment in technological improvements in their planner. Because of what they did there, we've seen their yield trend change. That's what I'm talking about when I say what's the investment value in the upgrade. Because I agree with you. I think what you're talking about, particularly as it relates to planners, that's going to become more and more commonplace, and probably should become more commonplace. Because when the technology allows you to capture profit opportunity because you're using it to do something different in your production, that's the exact type thing that I, as a banker, that's exactly what I want a producer looking at, because I welcome that conversation when they come and say, can we sit down and talk? Because I've got the opportunity here. I can trade planners, and I'm going to use arbitrary numbers, but I can trade planners for $250, or I can upgrade my units, and my technology on my existing bar for 150. Okay. Let's sit down and talk about what each one of those investments is going to return you. And I love it, Casey. And I think there's more salesmen in your industry that are doing a really good job of this every day. I think they're helping educate those borrowers. And I personally love it as a banker when a borrower comes in and they're prepared to have that discussion.
Right.
Now, from the banking perspective, and again, here's why I say this is my personal opinion. It may or may not be reflective of the banking industry as a whole. With the cost of trades and upgrades, many times today, it's not necessarily just the individual lender that is going to be considering that request for financing. It may very well be going to a collective group, a loan committee, if you will, that is making that decision. And that's where that data of profit increase opportunity becomes valuable to the lender, because a lender may or may not be communicating with a group of people in the banking industry that they may not understand the difference between a John Deere 7200 and a John Deere 1795.
Yeah.
So it's about being able to tell the story from a business perspective and educating folks that may not have similar knowledge of how this technological investment is going to return value to that customer. So I think that's the key thing, Casey, going forward. And it goes back to that age-old issue of communication.
Right.
How do we communicate? What do we communicate? And from my perspective personally, I love those conversations for two reasons. Number one, it helps me understand the knowledge level of the borrower that I'm working with. Now, I probably already have a pretty good idea about that anyway, but that conversation does nothing but help to cement that relationship even more, that these farmers are on top of their business game as well, because they're looking at these things.
Right.
But they're also then giving me the information that I need in order to communicate with a collective group about why this is a really good opportunity for this borrower.
Yeah. So would you recommend, for example, taking your agronomist with you into something like that to further explain that?
If the,
what seedbed preparation does for planting?
Casey, I think if the farmer is not comfortable having that discussion by themselves, absolutely. Because one of the things, again, if I look at me as a banker personally, and I think this is true for the most part in the banking industry, we have discussions with producers where we say, look, we're a member of your advisory team. Well, most teams function a little bit better when all the members have the ability to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing a lot of teams that do real well otherwise. So, yeah, I think Casey's a great opportunity, because it allows that relationship to be developed among the advisory team members for that farmer.
Yeah.
And it allows for any specific questions to be answered directly from the source. So, yeah, I think that would be a great opportunity for learning for all parties involved in that transaction.
Yeah. So from an information, so you brought up where you had a customer and then you were looking at their 10-year yield average and those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that data do you think would be worthwhile taking with you, or at least making available to your banker? I mean, obviously, the banker has to understand what they're looking at, but I mean, is it? I guess, what's your opinion of that?
Well, first of all, if that customer's been dealing with that banker for multiple years, I really hope that banker already has that information and they're getting it from the producer annually. If it's a completely new relationship, I think that is a tremendous tool to have to help the banker see what has been done. And it also, Casey, helps that banker understand the basis upon which projections are made going forward.
Yeah.
So that banker has confidence that the projections are attainable based upon history. Now, obviously, if this is a new purchase and it's a new relationship, then the communication is going to sound a little bit differently, just simply because there's not the history there. But I do think, Casey, that is a fantastic thing for the producer to have. And number one, the crop insurance agent has that information if they're not maintaining it themselves.
Right.
But I would think most producers probably have that 5 or 10 year yield history that they can reference.
Okay. So this is also a time of the year too where you start taking a look at balance sheets and what's on there as far as assets and those kind of things go, and you're starting to look at values and what that looks like and all those kind of things. Mm-hmm. How often do you as a banker go through, and look at what the values are stated on the balance sheet for the combine, for the tractor, for the planter, for the tillage pieces, so on and so forth? And how often do you go through and be like, we're going to do an appraisal of this so we can really get a hardcore value of what we see in the marketplace?
The answer to the first question, how frequently do I do it? At least every 12 months.
Okay.
Now, relative to the appraisal, traditionally speaking, I do not want a customer expending funds for something that they're not going to see some value for.
Sure.
Now, here's some ways that the customer can see value. And candidly, what I'm about to say is probably the single biggest discussion point we're having about equipment right now as I sit down with people. My concern is if they don't have an insurance agent that is meeting with them annually, that has knowledge in this industry and is reviewing the data, I don't want to see them have a combine fire or worse yet. We had a case in our area not too far from us where a shop burnt recently and a lot of equipment inside them. I don't want to see them find out that they were underinsured at the wrong time.
Right.
Now, granted, none of us wants to pay higher insurance premiums, but the reality is we don't want an indemnity claim and find out that what we thought we had, we really don't have. So that's the primary thing that as we go through a complete machinery and equipment list, that I'm encouraging them, hey, take this data that you and I have just compiled, because most of them don't have a current machinery and equipment list. I shouldn't say that, but unfortunately it's true. Here's something that you and I have created together. Take this to your insurance agent. That way they have a record of what you have. Let's just make sure it's accurate. But there's a good way that I could provide value as a lender, providing that list. And hey, if there's any questions on it, please have your insurance agent reach out to me. So I think that's a good value proposition. I will also say this, Casey, traditionally speaking, appraisals on the banking side are utilized when there's a refinancing being done. Now, historically speaking, one of the things that I've seen in banking, if you do a real estate loan, there's always going to be an appraisal or an evaluation, depending upon what you're looking at. Is we've seen the value of equipment, in my opinion, grow exponentially. Plus, as farms have gotten bigger, you're looking at machinery and equipment being a significant component of total equity for that operation. I would say this, it's not terribly uncommon to see machinery and equipment amount to 30 to 33% of total equity, depending on the circumstances. That's a big number. And I would expect, Casey, going forward in the lending industry, I think machinery and equipment appraisals may become a little more commonplace than what we've seen historically. Because over my career, I've not seen a tremendous amount of times where machinery and equipment lists have been subject to an appraisal. There have been some, don't get me wrong, but it's certainly not as commonplace as what we see on the real estate side. The other reason, Casey, that I think machinery and equipment appraisal can be of significant value, one of the discussions that I have frequently with borrowers today is the importance of both a succession plan and an estate plan. And in valuing an estate, depending upon how the title of that machinery and equipment list is held, here again, you're talking about significant numbers. If you're working with an attorney and you're going through your list of assets, I would hate to see someone grossly under or overvalue that machinery and equipment list. And I think there's a pretty important piece of information to have as part of your estate planning.
Right on. Okay. That's that's always something I'm somewhat shocked by is as for the number of dollars associated with it. How there's some guys I work with that know to the penny what something's going to bring at an auction, and there's some guys that I work with that have no earthly clue what it's worth. And I think, to me, that's one of those things on the, especially because you just said it's almost 30 to 33% of the equity that's out there. That's a big chunk of something that you don't know what it's worth. I think a lot of guys understand what their land's worth. I think a lot of guys understand what those kind of their cattle are worth and corn, their crops are worth, but there's still a whole third of their entire operation out there that is just kind of left to, I don't know, it's just, I mean, I know there's only so many hours in a day to educate yourself on things, but it's just one of those things where I think having that good partnership, like you said, that advisory board of people, trusted advisors type of thing that can keep that in check. So right on.
Yeah. In Casey, again, that number, that 30 to 33%, that number can vary wildly.
Right.
If you've got an extremely large operation that relies predominantly on rented acres, that machinery and equipment list may be a higher percentage of your overall net worth. So, when I use that number, I'll say it this way. There are instances out there where that number is going to be way higher than that, and there's also less than that. But I guess my point being, and you touched on that very well, I think that's an important enough number to have a good handle on. And it's okay if you don't know today, because of what you said. We can't all be experts in everything. It's okay to maybe not have a good handle on it. But if you know you don't have a good handle on it, what are you doing about making sure that you don't create yourself a problem down the road because of your lack of knowledge in a certain area?
Okay. All right. So this is a crystal ball question here. I don't know if yours is broken, cloudy as mine is, but I guess looking out through 23, what are some of the concerns you're looking at, and what are some of the optimistic points you see kind of headed our direction?
Well, obviously, we still have input costs that are high in relation to what we are used to historically. Depending upon where you are in the country, we don't know what we're going to be looking at from a moisture perspective going into this crop year.
Sure.
So those are two things that I would say are challenges worth taking note of. I've heard some discussion recently that, similar to what the discussion was that we heard going into 2022, there could be certain chemicals that may have limited availability. Again, we didn't see that, despite the discussion that we heard of that in our area and going into the 22 crop. We didn't see that manifest itself over a wide area. I have no idea what 2023 is going to hold. I'm not an expert in that area, but I have heard that discussion. We know interest costs for those folks that are borrowing operating money. We know those costs are going to be higher than what they were in 2022 for the most part, unless someone was pretty forward thinking and locked in some borrowing costs on operating lines, either through the form of securing it with cash or with some multi-year interest operating products that are in the marketplace. So I think those are some of the challenges. Opportunities, I think there's still a lot of them. I'm still very bullish on agriculture. We're going into this year with some pretty good pricing opportunities, even with the input costs that are out there. With some of the pricing opportunities that we have today, there's some profit opportunity, I believe, that's presenting itself as we move into this crop year. Obviously, we don't know where yields are going to end up for 2023, but our crop insurance does give us some pretty good potential there. We know on the corn soybean side, we've got to see where February ends up before we know what that base level is going to be. But I do think, Casey, the current commodity prices provide a good discussion point for farmers to be having with their marketing representatives of how they can lock in some profits. I think as a whole going into 2023, and again, we'll know more as we kind of see where year-end balance sheets end up. I think working capital is going to still be a strength that most operations have because of the year that 2022 appears that it will be. So I think that's a very positive item as well. You can speak more on the increasing availability of equipment than I can. So, I would think that as supply chain issues get resolved, some of the challenges that we've seen over the past couple of years in equipment availability, hopefully we'll see some things develop there that kind of ease those supply chain. And that's true, whether it's a part issue or whether it's a machine issue.
Sure.
So I think there's some things there. An intangible positive that I see, guys have proven, I think, and gals too, because there's some great females out there operating farms. I think producers have proven that they can handle the challenge of dealing with smaller margins on bigger dollars.
Right.
A business perspective. I've seen producers increasing their business acumen. I think they're becoming more proactive in understanding their numbers than what they were a few years ago. I think they have a better understanding of break-even points. And what I'm seeing for the most part, I'm seeing producers welcome the opportunity to learn of how they can become better business people. I think that's a huge positive that we have going into it. And as the average size of operations continues to increase, that's going to become a more and more important tool. And that's where those advisory groups that I referenced earlier, whether it's a banker, whether it's the equipment dealer, the crop insurance agent, the marketing person, I think that's tools that producers have come to learn that they can utilize in a more effective manner than maybe what they have historically.
Right on. Okay. Agree with everything you're saying there, man. We'll talk about the equipment availability issue on the next podcast, because I think there's some things there that are going to, I think, have a pretty big effect on the marketplace as we move forward. So, well, love talking to you, Alan. If folks want to reach out to you and get more information about what you're doing over at American Farm Mortgage, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. Probably the simplest way is the email, and my email is ahoskins@americanfarmmortgage.com. I also welcome phone calls. I'm still old school, Casey. I love having conversations with folks because I learn from them. And that phone number is 800-876-2362.
Right on. Well, Alan, I appreciate you being on the podcast, man. I look forward to next month when we sit down and talk again.
Absolutely, Casey. Thank you for the opportunity. And by the way, you do a great job on here. You educate a lot of people. I appreciate what you're doing for helping agricultural. And I'll also put a plug in for the summit that you have, the Moving Iron Summit. It is a great opportunity to learn, great opportunity to network, and I would highly encourage people to take that opportunity.
I appreciate that, Alan. Thanks very much, man. I am Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Moving Iron LLC. Go to LinkedIn at Moving Iron Podcast and check out the video version of this on the cleverly named Moving Iron Podcast YouTube channel. So check that out. I can also find a lot of information about what's going on here at MovingIronLLC.com. You can find all the information from the Moving Iron Summit that will be getting posted here over the next couple of weeks. I got some pretty good speakers lined up, and got some other things lined up too. I think they're going to be pretty interesting. So check that out. If you want more information about that, you can send me an email at MovingIronPodcast@MovingIronPodcast.com, and I will get that over to you. Make sure you take advantage of that $50 discount from the folks over at Axon Tire. So with that, I'm Casey Seymour with Alan Hoskins. Let's get smart, folks. Out.
Moving iron in the 21st century.